Welcome to the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast.
Well, then Perez has got the better of it, and he looks to get the better of Schmeichel, and he's done it. Wilson's going to fall here for Alexis Henry, chance.
Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed.
This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, and you can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. We are going to cover all of the details of what was a thrilling defeat at Stoke, 1-0. We have a full panel of experts to discuss, break down, and otherwise conclude what happened on the day, and they are led by, of course, the captain of our team, Paul. You can find him on Twitter at Paz in my pants. Hello, Paz.
Woo!
I say you are captain of the team because you are short on time and you may not finish the match. Tim is also in the team today. You can find him on Twitter at Stilberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
Hello there, indeed. You survived Mordor, I see?
Yeah, just about.
Just about. Well, I'm sorry you had to make the trip for that. Anyway, Clive is here as well. You will recognize him by his deep and husky and all-around professional-sounding voice. Clive is on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Hello, indeed. Well, it wasn't one for the history books, although I guess the history books write down the bad ones too. So technically it is one for the history books, not one you're going to want to rewatch. Although, Paul, you will be happy to know I gave it a second viewing. And I'm kind of glad I did, because after watching it a second time, I actually thought it was a better performance than I had surmised on first viewing.
Good man.
We will come to that in a moment. But first, I think we have to address the issue of the day, which is really how the manager is setting up the team, which leads to questions about squad construction, which we will come to. Tim, I think it would be impossible to just get past how he's picking the side right now. And after a admittedly dicey performance in the opening match, holding his drop completely. In fact, today he's playing for the under-23s, or he's in the under-23 squad. I don't know if he was on the pitch.
He was.
There you go. Yeah. So he's playing for the under-23s. Chambers still looks like he's on his way out. Gabriel has been sold. It is now leaning towards, I think, at least concluding that potentially Kolasinac, or Kolasinac, as he wants to say it, so we're going to say Kolasinac, might be a center back for us. Monreal is now a center back for us. Mustafi came back in and did not impress. We have our wing backs, one of whom isn't really even a wing back, playing on opposite sides. Let's start with the back five, so to speak. What is your theory on why he's picking them the way he is?
Because he doesn't know what he's doing.
Boom! Let's tell me what you really think, Tim. I went to you because you're supposed to be the circumspect one, but okay, let's do it.
What I actually think, right, is that basically he's just trying to cram players into the team, whether they're in position or not. And he doesn't want to make the decision between Oxlade-Chamberlain and Bellerin, so he's trying to put them both in the team for the sake of shoehorning them. I think because Arsene Wenger's been there so long, sometimes we bend over backwards trying to, get some kind of logic in his decisions. I do have kind of a theory on Bellerin and the Ox, which I won't go into too much because I've written about it this week. But basically, usually Arsene likes one of his wide players to be quite direct and like a proper winger almost, or someone who takes players on, and he likes the other one to be a bit more technical. And Bellerin, he does the combination play. He was brought up as a central midfielder at Barcelona, so he does that nice 1-2 kind of stuff, getting to the byline, whereas Chamberlain's much more meat and potatoes, beat the man, sling it in the box. And if one of them was left-footed, you could argue that they would actually be quite nicely balanced at wing-back, but the problem is they're both right-footed and they're both much, much better on the right-hand side. So I think basically he just doesn't want to make that decision between Oxlade-Chamberlain and Bellerin. As for what on earth is going on with the three centre-halves, I mean, like I say, we could bend over backwards trying to find some logic, but let's just list some basic facts. We sold Gabriel on Friday. We left Rob Holding out of the 18. We left Callum Chambers out of the 18. And we played two left backs at centre half and a right winger at left back. I mean, you can kind of try and surmise. And we didn't have any sort of injury crisis. And we left Per Mertesacker on the bench. And there's no sort of injury crisis. We have the players available where we don't have to do that at all. It's not, against Leicester, you could perhaps kind of make the argument that we were a bit limited, which we were, so fine. But we weren't limited. He just chose to leave players out. And on one hand, sometimes we get a bit too hung up on what players' definite positions are. It's much more about the balance of the team. But you can't make the argument that all of these players in that combination of positions balances the team. It does exactly the opposite. And it made us really quite tentative, particularly in the build-up. And, players that were beginning to look quite sure and confident at the end of last season now no longer do. And, I find very little justification for it other than the fact that Arsene Wenger doesn't really like confrontation. He's got Chamberlain, who he really wants to sign a new contract, so he wants to keep him happy. But he's got Bellerin for 5 years, so that's his horse. And Bellerin tried to leave in the summer anyway, so he wants to keep him happy. And he's politicking for the sake of the team. And with some players, you can kind of accept that. Like Alexis, I'm totally behind Arsenal's decision to let him go on a free this summer and just have him for the next year. Ozil, I can see an argument for it, although I'd be open to a good offer myself. Politicking for Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain is an absurd situation for a club like Arsenal, and that's not me having a go at Ox. If he's made his mind up to go because he wants to do something else, absolutely fair play to him. I see why he wants to do that, and the club should just draw a line under it. And costing ourselves 3 points, trying not to hurt people's feelings is just, it's an absolutely absurd situation. And I know you can look on the balance of play and say maybe we were a bit unlucky, but ultimately look at the goal we conceded. Yeah. It was a massive symptom of uncertainty both in midfield and at the back. And for the manager to pick that back three and then come out afterwards and say I wasn't convinced by our central defence today is absurd. And
I thought that was amazing that he had such pointed words. I think it's almost his way of saying, don't blame me for who I picked. Those guys could play better than they did. It's not on me, it's on them.
He didn't say the central defence, though. He said our central defending, by which I thought it might mean the same thing, because he's definitely saying Monreal and I would assume Xhaka.
But I think, Paul, his point in making that comment, in bringing that up specifically and calling attention to it, I think is a way of saying this has nothing to do with who I selected. These guys can play better than this. Tim, you want to finish your thoughts, and then we'll keep going?
Just quickly to say, this is end of days stuff. This is the sort of desperate floundering that managers that are trying desperately to fight off relegation and know they're about to get sacked and just start throwing balls randomly in the air. That's what they start doing. But all right, to sum up, basically, a really good manager anticipates problems before they arrive, and that's what Arsene Wenger used to do. A good manager solves problems.
Like what Conte did after he lost to us last season.
Yeah. A good manager solves problems. An average manager will go through a bit of trial and error and basically stumble upon something that works. And that's where Arsene Wenger just about got to last season. A bad manager creates problems for his team, and Arsene Wenger created problems for us. And at the moment, he looks like the weakest link to me in the whole club, because I think that's a decent squad. I just think it's badly managed politically, and it's badly coached.
Strong words. And I'll tell you what, I wondered, because remember, we did stumble onto the back three. It was a flailing solution to the worst ever period of form under Arsene Wenger in his 2 decades of serving as manager. And there was questions this summer about whether he would commit to the back three going forward. And when he bought Kolasinac, I thought, well, that leans towards thinking he has a plan for this formation, because Kolasinac was one of the best wingbacks in all of the Bundesliga last year for Schalke, and that was an indication that was where he was headed. And yet he's brought him in, at least in the first 2 games, to play at center back. And some of his post-match comments about Ox and Bellerin being able to both play left and right wing back suggest that he may continue to be willing to do that. Clive, there's another aspect to the way this is being set up, though, and I don't think it's getting as much attention, but I think it deserves it. Danny Welbeck had a Danny Welbeck day. He is a dynamic, talented, powerful, pacey player who causes all kinds of problems. But without wanting to diminish his quality, he is Synogoian, or Synogoan? What would that be, the adjective there? Synogoian? In his ability to squander chances and not sort his feet out or head out for end product. And I can kind of get behind the idea of playing him because he creates so many good situations, but do you have some issue with the fact that it appears that Lacazette is playing in support of him instead of the other way around? Now, Lacazette appears to be an excellent passer and mover, and he did create a brilliant chance for Ramsey with a lovely chip ball over the top, but I mean, again, if we have so many players playing out of position and against their instinct, their instinctive play, shouldn't we, at least up front, where you need to be clinical in the key moment, have our best finisher playing up front at the top of this formation?
It's a big answer, mate. When I saw the team selected, I thought I tweeted out, this is the most on the ball team I've ever seen. Right, so every player we picked had real talent on the ball. Off the ball, I was concerned about. So I wasn't too worried about the balance of the front because they move around so much anyway. I mean, as soon as the game kicked off, the wing backs swapped over. The rotation between Ramsey and Ozil was happening straight away. Ozil was spending a lot of time deep, and Ramsey was high. I said this subject for later on, no doubt. And Welbeck was driving down the sides, and Lacazette was coming to the ball and combining. I'm not against that. The issue in the game was the right-back channel that the youth had was a disaster, right? And so we were firing into that channel, and that just happened to be where our right-footed wing-back on the left side was in position. So his accuracy on the cross wasn't great. We got Danny Welbeck, who I spoke to you before about his shot preparation, his last stride before he shoots or passes is terrible. His shot selection, shot preparation is poor. So he lacks composure in the last moment before he strikes a shot. Right, so that all happened to be in the channel where they were weakest. And I was watching the game thinking, if Alexis was in this channel, it'd be 3-0 before 30 minutes was up. There was a period in the game, I'm sure I watched it twice as well, there's a period in the game from about the 14th minute to about the 40th minute, up until Diouf took a little rest for his little run through, when they broke up the game. We had them dead. And we couldn't manage to find the right shot pass, and none of the shots really fell to Lacazette, and that was the issue. And there was an issue there, you know, we talk about Danny Welbeck, but there's an issue around penalty box spacing. What we did criminally and naively was sensed that they were weak, and then we rushed the box too soon. We had too many bodies around Lacazette. He had no lines of communication. He couldn't be found on cutbacks. We want him to be found. We need to leave him the space as required. And then if he wants to lay it off in the second phase, then we can strike from the edge of the area. But we rushed into the box, wanted to be the one to score the first goal. And we added to what I call Stoke's barricade. By crowding the box early, you actually put more bodies in when you want to create space in the box. So I felt we were very naive and very schoolboy-like. Danny Welbeck, we know what we get. It's only May, we were watching the cup final, and he'd roll, pushing Louise around and pushing Cahill around on that left channel was massive trust winning the game. Right, so it never looked like scoring. You have to accept it. Right, so when Alexis is there, when Ozil's scoring, and now we've got Lacazette, we don't mind so much. When we don't score, we look at the guy that's got a poor track record, poor shot selection, poor pass selection in the last third. I'm afraid we have to decide really if that's enough. There is a question mark around him. He does need to improve, and if we're really, really honest, when it comes to the crunch, his goal-scoring record is not improving since he's been at Arsenal.
Yeah, I love the player because of all the things he gives us. I think in this system where we have one less attacking player and without Alexis and with Ozil not really looking like a goal scorer, it puts a lot of pressure on Lacazette, for example. So I think that there are question marks about not just Danny Welbeck, but about whether this formation makes sense with all of the shoehorning we're doing to build it, and whether we have the right attacking solutions up there. We'll come to the subject.
Elliot,
yeah.
The formation makes sense. The players he's putting in it doesn't make sense.
Well, right, no, of course, but that was my point, Clive, was simply that if we're going to be shoehorning these players in, this isn't the formation we need to be playing, right?
Potentially, yeah. I think he's. I keep going back to the cup final. Even when the balance was wrong, but how he used the players in the back line was perfect. He just has gone off, and I have this theory that he experiments sometimes. And I heard Martin Keown say something the weekend. It really struck me. He says that with Jose Mourinho, he creates an urgency. He creates an urgency within the club where you have to win now. And I transpose that thought back to Arsenal, and that's exactly the opposite of what's at Arsenal. We don't create an urgency where we have to win. And what we're talking about now is another problem that Wenger takes too long to solve, or he has created himself. So when you see that as a player, when you see how long it takes to buy the players that we need or to pick the right people in the right formation, you think, well, there's no pressure here. There's no urgency to win. If there was urgency to win, we would put Per Mertesacker at Stoke, because that makes perfect sense, right? So there is no urgency, and it's the culture of the manager he knows he can experiment because there is no massive pressure on him. He's untouchable. There is no urgency. It's too comfortable. There's no urgency to win.
Of course he's under pressure. Of course. He's under massive pressure. My God.
Honestly, he's not under pressure. A person's under pressure is a young manager making his way in the game, trying to establish himself.
Wow.
He is established. He has made over 100 million pounds out of the club.
Clive, it doesn't matter how much he's got in the bank. He was nearly out on his ear last year. He knows that.
He doesn't care, Paul. It doesn't matter.
Of course he cares.
If he loses his job tomorrow, the world won't end for him.
Let me mediate this just for 1 second.
For him, because it's not just about the money.
Well, let me mediate this just for a second, because, Paul, I want to come to you on an issue of the actual game itself. But what I would say is I agree with you both in the sense that I'm sure he feels tremendous pressure, but the pressure of a man who is approaching retirement, whose legacy in the game is fairly well secure, who has made the money he needs to for his lifetime, who will be remembered and revered,
but
is
he's
different.
Made the money either way.
No. That was my point. My point is that is a different pressure from a Tuchel or a Klopp, or not so much Mourinho, but someone who is still trying to climb that ladder. He desperately wants to win
the league. He desperately wants to reestablish us. The pressure to get into the top four, to leave the club in a better position, no matter what way you look at it, there is pressure on him. It's massive pressure, and he puts his own pressure on himself.
I don't doubt that he wants to win. I think these are different types of pressures. Look, we'll come back to the manager in a minute. I want to ask you something, Paulo, because look, if you look at Michael Cayley's XG graphics or statistics, which I like to use, I think he has good consistent numbers there, and XG is a good way to reference the overall play of the game, even though it is not a hard and fast rule about who played well and who didn't. I think it was 1.4 Arsenal to 0.8 Stoke. So clearly we had the chances. We were the more dominant side. I think I heard on Arsblog's podcast, if you've ever heard of it, it's called Arscast. It's excellent. I recommend it. I think he said that this was the lowest amount of possession a team had ever won with in Premier League history or something like that. We had something like 72% of the possession. And Paul, you can go through it. Welbeck had the header he fluffed. He had the one where he was in on goal with two players on him and couldn't get the shot cleanly away, and it was saved. Ramsey had the ball over the top from Lacazette where he took the shoulder barge, which could have been a penalty. Bellerin had the penalty he should have been given. Bellerin had the wide position where he was played in by Ozil and shot straight at the keeper when he maybe could have pulled back. There were all kinds of chances. There are more that I'm forgetting. There were the handballs. Lacazette scored a goal that probably is a good goal. I have some sympathy for that. We can get into the refereeing decisions later, although I have never loved debating them because overall, I think as Arsenal fans, we're going to agree where the bad decisions and the good decisions were, and that isn't an interesting discussion to me. But so my question to you is, when you look at a game like this where it's so easy to fall back on narrative and it is so easy to fall back into the critical the habits of criticism that we have developed with this manager. How do you evaluate this in the context of the fact that actually this is a performance that on another day should have resulted in 3 points?
Narrow margins. I mean, we were all pretty pumped after the last game, but we were all very clear of the issues there. It wouldn't have taken too much for this to been an exciting game that we kind of escape by the skin of our teeth. And that's your first 2 games of the season. And last year we were almost about as suicidal around this point before we went on a 20-game unbeaten run, admittedly not against our toughest opposition of the year. And there were some Champions League group games in there to pad out the numbers. But while I agree with all of the points and criticisms so far, I think we'd all agree it's the second game of the season. And the failings are the failings. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with any of the criticisms on the manager, the selection. I think Tim has it spot on or pretty darn close as to the logic and maybe the false logic of the selection. But you got to give the man a little chance to correct things. Where I might disagree is I think he desperately wants to win this season because it's hell on earth to go through what he went last year. I don't think his heart will take it, and he certainly doesn't fancy 2 of those seasons in a row. So the pressure's massive either way. Might be a different pressure to a Tuchel, but it's, he's talking about his legacy. That's pretty close to his core here. So, I think we were probably, that hurt like getting kicked in the nuts by Lucas Podolski. And I don't think there's anybody who saw that game who didn't just fucking curl up in a ball afterwards. So I wouldn't even begin to minimize it, but it's still the second game of the year. And the manager, we're clearly waiting on a few players to come back. We shouldn't have had to. Those aren't excuses for why that game didn't go as it should. I think he had enough raw material to get the result. Certainly it should have been a creditable draw or better. He did make all of those mistakes as listed, but everybody gets another chance. We get another 36. Now, 3 points can be very, very costly. And it does feel like he built up our hope, and that's part of the reaction comes down to 2 things. We're seeing the same failings that have tripped us over, and it feels like we were promised some hope that we'd begun to buy into that all got evaporated for seeing those same mistakes again. But, still, it's the second game of the season. Some important players have to come back. Part of what we saw in that front area, that front third, was players who had no understanding of playing, well, not enough understanding of how to play together. We saw in the back third problems springing up all over the place, and we saw in the middle of the park Xhaka and Ramsey and Ozil, but specifically Xhaka and Ramsey making the wrong decisions at the wrong time. Now, all of those areas can improve, but we saw what we saw. So I'm not necessarily contradicting what my counterparts here are saying, except to say, I'm hoping we address these for the rest of the season. We have time, and we can play a hell of a lot better in each area of the park. And Arsene knows. Well, I pray to God Arsene knows how this movie plays out. So changes have to be made.
You're adding context, right? And the context is absolutely spot on. It's the second game. We've got 36 to go, but I was just highlighting things that I felt could have made us more efficient in the last third. Right? So,
I agree with everything you said, Clive. I really do. I think all the criticisms, Tim, Elliot, you.
Well, wait. I don't want to be lumped in with those two.
Yeah, I think the criticisms are on the mark. It's the narrative going forward, which, don't get me wrong, if I'm a betting man, I'm probably betting with you guys. But
let me say this too. I mean, look, the problem is when you go away, especially going away, you get a first goal and you can totally change the way the game is played. Now, I realize we got the first goal against Leicester and we promptly turned that into a 2-1 deficit. But if we put away any of those early chances or we get any of those penalty shouts, the game is played in a much different way. And I actually thought Oxlade-Chamberlain played really well in the first half hour, created a couple of really good opportunities. Bellerin got him behind on a few occasions and, maybe didn't play the perfect final ball. But I mean, it wasn't
It's remarkable what watching it a second time does, isn't it?
Yeah, well, Oxlade-Chamberlain had 2. He had a chip over the top and he had a ball sort of from the right half space into entry ball into Welbeck at the top of the box that was really excellent and led to a chance. But
he also took the free kick for Ramsey, which Ramsey hit against Butland.
Yep.
We had a period. We had a 30-minute period where we were untouchable.
Yep.
Untouchable.
And what I will say, sorry, finish your thought, Clive.
Oh, we just didn't score, and goals change everything, don't they?
Yeah, I mean,
we go in at half-time 1-0 up. We're all really, really buzzing at the performance, the movement, the rotation.
Listen,
the drive down the sides. We're not talking about some of these things. I absolutely get it, but when it comes down to it, I'm sure we'll get onto it. There are some failings there that we just repeat, and when you walk away from a game and you lose 1-0 in a game where you have 77% possession and 17 attempts on goal, you are entitled to a touch of frustration.
Of course, and I will say this. I just think the point is when you lose, and you lose in frustrating fashion, it is much more fulfilling to cover the failures than it is to acknowledge the successes. And I think this is a bit of a tricky game to analyze only because there were good moments and there were good elements of it. And of course, I am no one... I'm never going to be confused with a Pollyanna. I am not one to gloss over the failings, and we will get to them.
Lord knows.
The Lord knows, and thank God for that. But so, and Tim, we're coming to you now, but I just want to say, I mean, I think where you see the problem with playing players out of position, and I realize Xhaka made a really bad couple of decisions. The pass was poor to Ozil, and then pinching up, pressing in that situation, allowing 3 players to bypass him was bad. But watch Monreal. This is what happens when you have fullbacks playing the centermost center back position. He tracks, what are we going to call the guy? Jesse's girl?
Yeah.
Hesse, yeah.
Okay. So Jesse's girl is coming across him, and he tracks him. He does. But he makes the critical error of taking one beat to think about holding the line and letting Hesse run in behind and playing him offside. And he realizes he can't do it, and then he starts tracking him again. But that beat he takes where he can't decide how he wants to suss out that threat, that gives Hesse the chance to get behind him and in position to get on the ball and score. And I don't think an experienced center back makes that error. I'm not saying, an experienced center back necessarily gets it right, but I think they have the right instinct there, which is I have to follow this guy and track him all the way. I'm not going to stop and step up. There's no opportunity for that. And that's an example of where, these are good players, but center back in particular, I think, is a position where why are players better at 28, 29, 30 than 22, 23, 24, unlike other positions? Because developing that experience and that feeling and that sense of understanding of how to defend certain situations is such an important part. Experience is such an important part of the center back position. So, Tim, the goal they get, I just covered it, and you can certainly cover it a little more if you want to go into the goal. I also then want to come to the substitutions, and I know that's skipping way ahead, but if we want to give the manager a little bit of pass for the lineup, which actually performed relatively well for a stretch of the game, the substitutions felt like almost doubling down in some respect, leaving Ox and Bellerin on, taking Kolasinac out, and by the way, yes, we have changed that pronunciation because, as I understand it, that's how he wants to be called, so Kolasinac, taking him out, and then removing the most clinical finisher that was in the team, Lacazette, and leaving the guy who couldn't score for toffee or shoot for toffee. Again, don't know what it means, but I'm going to keep using it. Welbeck on. For you, were the substitutions a greater error of judgment than the lineup itself?
They were very much on brand. I think they were pretty much the same. I mean, the thing I'd say about the goal is we're all wise after the event, although I don't think anyone would say that suggesting playing Per Mertesacker at centre-back is being wise after the event. But, what's his greatest attribute is his reading of the game, his ability to intercept, a
telescopic leg there that gets the ball away from Hesse before he gets the shot off, absolutely.
And you never know, he might not have been in the right position, he might have been somewhere else. I doubt it, but things play out obviously a bit differently. And the other problem for Monreal is he's a left back by trade, and Hesse makes the run off of his right shoulder over towards the right hand. It's not an angle that Monreal is used to dealing with, and I think those two things kind of unravelled in that moment. As for the substitutions, they were on theme. He still didn't want to make that decision between Bellerin and Chamberlain. And listen, I think I prefer Bellerin of the two, but I don't demand that Arsene Wenger agrees with me on that. I just like some sign that he's doing something that he's convinced by. How often did we have the Coquelin argument on this pod last year? And I wasn't entirely on board with him doubling down and playing Coquelin all the time. But at least I kind of thought to myself, well, do you know what? He believes in it. He's obviously got a plan for it. So fair enough. I don't agree with it, but that's not a requisite for saying you're a good or a bad manager. It's probably best you don't agree with me, actually. But I mean, I found the substitutions baffling because Kolasinac, I think last year in the Bundesliga, he played in midfield quite a lot for Schalke last year, and he ended up with loads of assists. And we saw it in pre-season, his ability to get to the byline and make the cutback. So if we'd have, changed our shape so that he was playing left back, I don't see that we'd have lost anything, anything attacking wise. And you know what? If Giroud's on, fine, take Bellerin off, because Chamberlain's much more likely to chuck in a cross. That's his skill. He's better at that than Bellerin is. I think Bellerin's better at pretty much everything else. But for that moment, it would have made sense. And yeah, the Welbeck one didn't make much sense to me either. Not really sure what I didn't think Granit Xhaka had a particularly good game, but I'm not really sure what taking him off at that particular moment. We're trying to find the right ball, the right pass, and we couldn't do it. And before those substitutions, there was a feeling that Arsenal were gaining a bit of momentum.
Yep.
I know Lacazette didn't do an awful lot, but that, and I think I said on one of the pre-season pods, it will take a few games for us to get used to Lacazette as much as the other way around, and he is pretty much, he likes to drop deep and link play, and he's quite good at that. But ultimately, he's a finisher, and he showed you that. And it was one of the only things he did in the game. But I mean, removing that kind of threat, the idea that if the ball drops in the box, and what I loved about that finish, it's so instinctive. It's on his left foot, and he's still his head is so cool. He just lashes it into the top corner, almost like a reflex, and that's incredibly promising. And if you're looking for a goal, that's something you really, really want. To then replace that with Theo Walcott, and then for the man who, in this kind of scenario where Stoke are defending deep, I mean, Theo Walcott is about as much use as an inflatable dartboard in this scenario. There's just no point. And then for Wenger to say something about he wanted him to put crosses into Giroud, and it's like, but you've already got Chamberlain, who can actually do that, by the way. Theo Walcott, that's never been his game. He'll get to the byline, and that's fine if you want to say that. We wanted to try and get in behind them or create some chaos, but the justification for it was odd. And
he hasn't really tried to do that since he played alongside RVP. I mean, in this game, Theo kept trying to edge into the striker spot. So indeed,
although I think, and again, I think this is another reason why I prefer Bellerin at wing back, because he does that combination playing, getting to the byline, and I think Lacazette will enjoy that quite a lot. And I think if we've got Kolasinac doing that as well, all the better. So if he'd have done that to provide for Lacazette, then yeah. But I mean, we took him off, and I don't know. It felt like we completely lost all momentum, and that's kind of what I was getting at the beginning of the pod when I said, at least even a good manager solves problems, even if he's the one that makes them. But I don't know. He created problems for us with the starting lineup, and I think that showed in the first 15 minutes of the first half where we couldn't get our bearings, and it certainly showed in the first 15 minutes of the second half. And if you look at how many goals we concede early in the second half, it's staggering. Only Watford conceded more in the 10 minutes after half time than Arsenal last season. So that tells you there's an issue with concentration, and that's probably a symptom of the fact that they don't know what they're supposed to be doing half the time.
Yeah.
And I think it cost us, and if anything, I think we'd have had a better chance of equalising if it had made no substitutions at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt it, and I think, on a day when the finishing wasn't working out, it was hard for me to understand taking off Lacazette. I mean, Kolasinac, for whatever you think of him, certainly looks like a threat to score, and a guy who, in the opening match, did really well when he got into more advanced positions, and taking him off and leaving on wing backs who, even despite some bright starts, had faded a little bit. I didn't understand that. I'm going to pause here for a live read of a quick advertisement. We'll keep going. Enjoying your summer? Spending time out by the pool? But wishing you could have brought your dartboard out with you? That's why we have Elliot's Inflatable Dartboards. You can bring them out to the pool. You can throw your darts at them. They are single use, so you'll want to buy them in quantity. Just hit us up on Twitter, and we'll show you how you can find those. Those will be available on our website. All right, moving on. I want to get to Clive on the midfield in just a minute, just a second. But, Paul, just really quickly, we're 2 games in. We had a little bit of a tete-a-tete on the back channel about Kolasinac, where I said my worry is that he sees him as one of the wide center backs, and that Ox and Bellerin are going to remain his first choice for wing backs. My fears certainly weren't allayed at all by the lineup and the substitutions today. And so I guess I just wanted to get your thought on what Arsene Wenger is thinking with Kolasinac, one of the best wing backs in the entire Bundesliga last year. He brought him in and looked like a brilliant stroke of genius in the transfer market, which he deserves credit for, but are you concerned that this may be one of those situations again where it takes the manager several months to slot him in where he's going to be most effective?
Only since you started talking about it all the time. Now you got me rattled.
Finally, I'm making progress.
He certainly, when he first talked about Kolasinac, he said that he talked about him as being a wing back, if I remember right, who could also play centre back. So now we've seen his descriptions of players move around on a regular basis. So, but I'm holding on to that with my fingers crossed. I think the chips have to fall in terms of Bellerin and Oxlade-Chamberlain to where the manager realizes that it's one or the other, and that they are both best suited to the right wing. But only time will tell on that one. But I mean, I've been assuming once we get our personnel back and Monreal is pushed to left wing back. I mean, if Kolasinac is going to play, if Kolasinac is going to play,
I'll fix that in post. Don't worry, Paul.
Yeah, Monreal is going to play left centre back. Then Kolasinac is going to sit on the bench. I don't think so. Mm-hmm. So I think that will help further force the issue. But you certainly have me wondering at this point. But it's too early to say. I still think Kolasinac is going to be our left wing back, and Arsene has a problem if he's going to try and keep both Bellerin and Oxlade-Chamberlain in the club and happy, because neither of them is going to be very happy about playing left wing back.
And look, I mean, we are seeing to some extent what happens when you play without your absolute best player, Alexis Sanchez, and arguably the best player in the Premier League, if not, one of the top 2 or 3. And that is, on a day like this where we did outplay them, where we did play well enough to get the win, I am confident that if Alexis Sanchez had started this game, that one of those opportunities, one of those attacks results in a goal, if not more. And this is 3 points instead of 0.
And we've recognized the issue that you can't just have one goal scorer on the pitch, and that was Lacazette. I mean, there's no other recognized goal scorer. The next closest is Ramsey, and that's only when he's in a goal-scoring run, which we're still scratching our heads.
Well, and he had chances. I mean, chances that I don't think he fluffed. I mean, I think tough chances that he got in behind. I mean, the encouraging thing on the day from an attacking standpoint is the Xhaka-Ramsey axis kind of did what it was supposed to do in the attacking half, if not the defensive half. So, Clive, I want to get to you on midfield balance, because I know this is a big bugaboo for you in terms of what we're doing with our central midfield. I think the Mesut Ozil thing is interesting, and Tim, I want to get a word from you on Ozil in a moment. So, Clive, we're going to skip you and go to Tim. No, I'm kidding. Clive, in terms of, we saw Xhaka El-Neni in the first game. We saw El-Neni's shortcomings. Ramsey came on, obviously got a goal. We saw the difference it makes. And I do think, by the way, if you look at Lacazette's chip over the top, Negative Tim typically said the only thing Lacazette did on the day was score the goal, which clearly isn't true. So you have to sort of filter through his negativity at times.
I'm loving the new Elliot.
It's a ton of fun, isn't it? I've gone completely off brand.
Another pod unless you swear to God you've watched the game twice beforehand.
Well, the chip over the top, the thing I like.
I can leave this pod in 5 minutes' time, knowing you have me covered.
I've got you covered. I got your back until we get on the Coughlin discussion, and then it's over. No, Ox had a chip, Clive, but Lacazette had that beautiful little chipped ball over the top. I think it was to Ramsey. Was it to Ramsey? No, it's to Ramsey.
It was to Ramsey.
Yeah.
You watch it again. I'll leave it with you.
I promise you Lacazette had one. But the thing that was encouraging is Ramsey, again, had the great first touch to set himself. And then he took the shoulder charge that I thought was a penalty. And he didn't score there.
Okay, yeah.
So what I wanted to get from you is, now that we saw the Xhaka-Ramsey partnership in this game, what do you think in terms of the fact that it looks like we're not in the market for a central midfielder, and how we're going to make this system work with the assets we have?
This is a big topic, right? So,
yeah, well, this is you. We're going to turn our mics off. I'm going to go get a drink. Fire away, man. We'll play some elevator music in the background. Girl from Ipanema, do it. Yeah.
I think for me, I'm a son of Patrick Vieira, right? So Vieira, Gilberto, Petit, that's my type of centre midfield. They are watching Chelsea yesterday. That guy Bakayoko, I thought he was tremendous. That's my type of player that I like, right? So we have a different style of player. We have Xhaka and Ramsey, who are both excellent players, but I think it's not about the players themselves. It's about their psychology and mentality, right? So when you actually judge a player, when you're coaching football, they call it the FA DNA, driven by what you call four corners, right? The four corners of the FA philosophy is psychology, social, technical, and physical, right? The psychology of our team between on and off the ball, the transition phase, is where we are lacking, and that's our issue, right? So when we have the ball, we are like silk, right? But when we're off the ball, we don't think about off the ball when we're on the ball. And I often talk about distances. Our centre midfield distances are shocking, right? So on the goal, it's a poor thing. The way we exit, we talked about exit strategy last week. What we do with our centre back is they get the ball and they just dump it 5 yards forward to Xhaka and give him the problem. We should be exiting down the sides, coming back into the centre, and then go in second phase. If you lose the ball centrally, you're in trouble. If you lose the ball on the sides, you can recover. You can use a touchdown as your friend. You can bounce people out. You can recover that situation. So our exit strategy is all wrong. But where does the psychology come from in a player where you dump the ball off, then you follow it and chase it, and you look at your midfield partner, and he's basically standing offside on the left wing 90 seconds into the second half. That means our manager in his team talk, what has he said? I don't blame the players. You're a product of your environment. If that's allowed, then there's something wrong. Especially when the week before we conceded after half-time. We conceded 14 goals after half-time last season and 2 this season. What are we doing to build our play, set a platform, own the game into the second half, and build up a level of momentum to win games? We need to think about how adult we are. I could easily highlight, I watched the game again today, and I got to say, some of Ramsey's football was absolutely brilliant. So I can't criticise the football player. I criticise the environment he's allowed to play in. If he's allowed to do that, there's something wrong, because you are basically vacating the centre of the pitch when there's 1 minute after half-time, when there's just no need to do it. And also what you're doing is you're forcing other people to react to your game. So if you ask me, I'll be honest with you, who I want in the last third, do I want Ozil or do I want Ramsey? I want Ozil. Who do I want in the middle third? Do I want Ozil running back towards his goal, or do I want Ramsey putting a tackle in? I want Ramsey doing that. So I know they were rotating, But in the end, we are, as a team, we're not getting the best attributes from our players. So if you know you've got a slow centre midfield partner, the way you counteract that is by keeping distances short. You don't make them big. I mean, this is obvious stuff. We have to decide, is this what we want? If this is what we want, then let's enjoy it. But when you concede the most goals in the top 6, the most shots on target last season, you've got to say to yourself, are we trying to resolve anything? I go back to my point about urgency. If it takes this long to resolve, there's no urgency to win. And we all know we want to win, Paul. We all know we want to win. But it's the urgency around fixing problems which manifests itself in messages to players and messages to fans. And it creates the division. Now, it's only the second game. So it's not the end of the world. It can be easily fixed. But it's frustrating when we've all seen the film before. All right, and we're going to lose more games. I just like it to be in a different way. Do you know what I mean? And so the players, I'm not going to criticise the players. It's the environment they're allowed to flourish in. We haven't got an off-the-ball thought process. We are an on-the-ball team. And when we don't score, our off-the-ball failings are magnified. And they were at the weekend when really we should have smashed them by about 4 goals if we'd have been better in the opposition box. So it's up to us really. What do we want? How do we want to play? Are we serious? Could we survive the Tottenham-Chelsea midfield smashing yesterday? Will we do it a different way? But I do think we need to learn lessons to resolve the problems that we have by being a bit more compact, a bit more closer together, and build play in a much more considered way. And I'm sure we'd come out on top.
Okay, I'm back. Clive, did you cover the midfield while I was gone?
Yes, I did.
Okay, cool. No, just kidding. I think that's really good insight, and I agree with all of it. And I think you just have to look at how their goal developed. Look, Xhaka's pass isn't great. I think he misreads the run that Ozil's making, and he misplaces a relatively short pass. But the reality is when Xhaka gets the ball in the middle third, he's alone. He really is alone because Ramsey is bombing forward. And what we're basically saying to Xhaka is you better complete 92, 93, 94% of your passes. Because if you don't, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And he's not super mobile, and he makes he doesn't have the best defensive instincts. We know that. So he compounds the problem by thinking, shit, I've given it away. I have to step up here, which is the wrong instinct. And this is where I just think a midfield 3 for our personnel is better because I think we want Ramsey feeling the freedom to make the runs into the opposition box. We've seen how devastating that can be, but I think Xhaka needs a partner next to him who's got range and mobility and can dribble and carry the ball forward. So Xhaka can sometimes give the easy pass to the player next to him and let him carry it into the attacking phase. Maybe that's and you know what? This is where I'm going to bring Tim in a second. I want Paul. Paul, you're good. You don't need your question answered.
Yeah, no, okay, I'm good.
Well, go ahead. Fire away. Yep.
I was just going to make a little observation that maybe Tim can comment on if he saw any of this. But it seemed like there was a period in the game where Ozil kept dropping deep. Like tripping over Xhaka.
Yeah.
Now, I understood why Ramsey he had to.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
It looked redundant because he was falling back to do exactly what it is Xhaka can do from there.
Well, all right. So this is what I wanted to get to Tim. And look, this is where I'm going to get pilloried, and the reviews are not going to be kind to me.
Say it.
But Tim, is this where look? Mesut Ozil is our most talented player, arguably. It's Alexis or Ozil. His talent is beyond question. But in terms of how we play, our lack of discipline, our lack of organization, and with Ozil being a player who needs tremendous freedom to excel and is, I guess, in that category of luxury player, is this a case where putting a guy like Naby Keita or Kovacic or someone like that next to Xhaka and moving Ramsey into one of the two behind the striker instead of an Ozil gets you more? And I don't mean it gets you more because Ramsey's better than Ozil. He's not. Ozil is the better player. But because Ramsey can get on the end of moves, because he probably is a better goal-scoring threat, because he has a little more energy and tenacity, and then your midfield has more of the balance. Is that... look, it's not a criticism of Ozil, the player. It's a criticism of Ozil in our system. And
he did seem to work his socks off, didn't he?
I get it. And in the Leicester game, he worked harder in the final 20 minutes than any player. It's the point of Mesut Ozil is that pixie of a player, that pop up all over the pitch, not about discipline and structure. He needs discipline and structure behind him. He thrived in Madrid with Jose Mourinho and his dour, rigid style where everybody else was doing their exact role. What I'm saying is, if that's Ramsey instead of Ozil in our system, Tim, and the midfield partnership is more balanced, do we have a better platform? Because look, it's not more goals we need to win the league. It's fewer goals we need to concede to win the league, right? So what's your take on Ozil's role in this system and on the day?
I'm inclined to agree with you. I mean, I've been thinking throughout this discussion, it sounds like what we're saying is we've got to make a choice between Ramsey and Ozil because it's very difficult to have both of them together. I did kind of think at the end of last season that having Ozil and Alexis together as inside forwards made a fair bit of sense and kind of alleviated that problem a little bit because it kind of separated them from the midfield and it kind of made them a front three, albeit then you don't have to have like the thorny issue of, well, then do you put Mesut Ozil out wide? You keep him as a member of the front three but in a fairly central position. I mean, we've spoken before about what's been happening. You know, Wenger likes to swap his two deeper midfielders over between, and he was kind of doing it at the end of last season with Xhaka and Ramsey, and then he seemed to make the decision that no, let's give them much more rigid, defined roles, which seemed to work. Now it kind of seems like it's Ramsey and Ozil that are doing the swapping, and it's not massively new. It has happened a fair bit in the past, particularly in games where we've really needed a goal. Quite often Ozil is the one to drop and to try and help us to build play. Mm-hmm. And that's what you saw with the goal. Yes, Ramsey was forward, but Ozil wasn't. So effectively, those two midfielders that are usually, not the same in terms of personnel, but usually we have two midfielders there, and that's what we had. It's just, as we saw, as the goal developed, they're not the guys you want chasing backwards.
No.
When the thing breaks down, and they both made an attempt, it's just that it's not what either of them do really. And what was interesting about Ramsey's game was that he actually won more tackles than anyone else on the pitch. Yep. He won a lot of 50-50s, and so the way I read it with Ramsey, what's been happening for the last kind of 6 to 7 months, I really noticed it at Preston in the FA Cup last season, is that I think in the first half he is told very much to sit and to stay put. And look at the minutes of his last 4 or 5 goals. They're all in the last 10 minutes of the game, because that's when we can avail of his energy. That's when he really comes alive, because his energy levels don't drop and everyone else's does. Mm-hmm. So at the beginning of a game, he still has more energy than most players, but in that last 10 minutes, that's when he can really make a difference, as we saw delightfully at Wembley in the cup final. So, and against Preston last year, he scored right at the beginning of the second half, and he pushed right up onto the edge of the box. And after he scored the goal, he ran over to the bench and pointed at Wenger, and that tells me that he was told, right, get the handbrake off and go forward a bit now. And that's probably become a bit more of a regular thing. So like Clive was saying, I think that was very much under instruction, that he was up there and Ozil was back. And you can kind of make sense of that on the ball, because you're playing a deep defence like Stoke. I would back Ramsey to find a space and score a goal in there, and I would back Ozil to find a ball between the two of them. But as we say, when we lose the ball, we saw what happened. We had, and I'm not suggesting that Ramsey would have done much better in that situation, even if I do think he does have those qualities and he has shown us that before, but he's really, really interested in the going forward bit, and it is the best part of his game, but he can do the dirtier side of the game. So to answer your question, I think we do have to kind of pick a horse really between Ramsey and Ozil. And if we're talking about playing politics, Ramsey's got 2 years to go on his deal, and Ozil's got 1, and it might be the guy who commits to you a bit. And maybe, we say to Ramsey, look, Ozil's going, he's not signing a contract, so we'll play you as the number 10, and maybe he really wants that. And, we'll give you we'll give you the keys to the team. You'll be the one that gets forward. Again, I'd be okay with that. But like I've said,
injury worries aside, obviously, fitness concerns.
I mean, but like I was saying about the Bellerin-Chamberlain thing, I just want Arsene Wenger to fucking well pick something and believe in it and do it. Whether it's the guy I'd back or, we can all have that discussion and we can all agree or disagree. I want him to back a bloody horse and make a decision. It just feels like at the moment, all over the pitch, he doesn't want to make any decisions. He doesn't want to upset people, which is why we'll probably have Giroud starting again pretty soon. Because he's really, really afraid. He's really, really wants to protect their feelings, and he wants Ramsey in his team. He wants Ozil in his team. He wants Chamberlain in. He wants Bellerin in, and maybe that three doesn't it doesn't quite fit. The equation doesn't quite go. So he's just shoehorning people, and it's like whack-a-mole. It just gives you a problem. Mm-hmm. And I tend to agree. The way football is at the moment, I think if you're going to play, I think a tight midfield three is a much better way to go. Much in the way, you look at that Real Madrid midfield of Modric, Kroos and Casemiro, and it's just, and listen, we're not going to get to that level, and I'm not suggesting that that's my expectation, but you look at something like that, and it's just, it fits together so well. Even PSG's midfield, I know they've just sold Blaise Matuidi, but that kind of Rabiot, Matuidi, Verratti, yeah, that almost like holy trinity of players who can just knock the ball between each other. You get a ball carrier in there, you get someone like Xhaka who can move the ball distance, you get someone like Ramsey who can move himself distance, and what you really need between those is someone who can carry the ball distance. That to me is like
Oxlade-Chamberlain.
The funny thing is, if we switch,
maybe Wilshere.
If we switch back to a 4-3-3, and I'm not saying we should do that, but if we switch back to a true three-man midfield, you could have Ox, I think, next to Xhaka with Ramsey ahead of them. I mean, I don't think that's out of the question.
That's my favourite three.
Yeah,
he went for that, didn't he, last season? And then he played it at West Brom, and he's never played it since the West Brom game. So
yeah, it's really weird. I mean, there are players that seem to be suited for certain roles based on their profile and their skill set, and the manager doesn't seem to either see it or want to use him that way. I mean, Ox, he is referred to as a central midfielder. He eschews every opportunity to use him there. Kolasinac, he said he's a wingback when he bought him. He hasn't played him there yet. Even when he had the chance to make substitutions to put him into that position, he hasn't. Lacazette is a center striker. That's what he is. He's supporting Danny Welbeck in these first two games. I mean, at least, nominally, but at least to a certain extent. There's a lot of curious decisions like that being made. And we saw it with Xhaka next year, where he said, he's a box-to-box midfielder, and then he's a more advanced midfielder. That's a deeper-lying midfielder. It takes him a while to sort of figure these players out. Clive, I should mention that once we started insulting Mesut Ozil, Paul said, fuck y'all, and dropped off the recording. So you can find Paul on Twitter at PositiveMyPants, and Paul, fuck you too. I'm kidding. We love Paul. He had to run. Clive, you want to weigh in on this? I mean, you already gave us your midfield soliloquy, but I'm going to give you a coda to that soliloquy.
Hey, just a little bit more on the Ramsey thing. We have to contextualise Ramsey's performance by the fact it's Stoke. And Tim knows that guy at Stoke, he covers every blade of grass. Maybe structure goes out of his mind. He was desperate to be man of the match. He was desperate to score. He was doing things in a very, very naive way. But if they'd have come off, he'd have looked very, very good. And you heard me talk about what I call interior and exterior players. Players who play on the outside, players who play on the inside. I see Ramsey as an interior player that can break to the outside. But he shouldn't be starting on the outside. When we've got good possession, he shouldn't be standing offside because he hasn't got the speed. What he has got is timing of arrival. So he needs to be smarter how he arrives. When he arrives at a third-man run, he looks quick. When he's standing on the last man, we don't want him standing on the last man because he's never going to win a sprint off a standing start of a central defender like Kurt Zouma. Why stand on his toes? Go into the half space, offer Xhaka a passing lane, be smart, build the play. This is what he needs to work out. If he was to reduce the space he controlled, I think he could be world class. His issue is he tries to do too much at times. And I've said it before, he's a Rolls Royce going forward and he's a Skoda coming backwards. Until we sort that situation out, we are going to be open. So we have to decide. I don't mind watching it, But we have to decide how we want to play. We have to decide how serious we are about our central midfield. This guy's got all the talent, but I'm afraid the way he plays with a deferent character like Ozil, as Tim alluded to, who owns his team? Who owns his team? When Alexis is there, funny enough, the balance works better because Alexis works back and they share it between the three. As we saw in the cup final, the three of them were unstoppable with Xhaka in behind them. So maybe that's all we're waiting for. We're waiting for Alexis to come back to maybe reduce the effort that Ramsey has to put in, and then we'll get a much more considered midfield, which we saw towards the end of last season.
Yeah,
and can I?
Okay, fine. I won't talk at all. Go, Tim.
Go on, Tim.
I just wanted to add, just to give a bit of like historical context to this, in terms of, you know, my choose a fucking horse and go for it. You know, 10 years ago, Arsene Wenger had Cesc Fabregas coming through, and he realised that Vieira and Fabregas couldn't coexist. Yeah. He realised that Henry and Fabregas couldn't coexist. And so he sold Vieira and Henry, and make no mistake, they were sold. Okay, that was our decision. Look at when the transfers went through, June. Yeah. They were sold because he backed Cesc Fabregas. And you can argue whether that was the right decision or not. It might not have been. But he was decisive. He chose his horse. He realised he had to clear out some big players to make it work. And
he did it.
There you go. And he did it, exactly. Mm-hmm. And you can argue whether that was right or wrong, but he made a clear decision. He went, right, I need 4-5-1 to give Fabregas the keys to this team. Henry can't play in that, and we can't have Vieira next to him. So he cleared them out. Within a year of one another, he cleared them out. And
really quickly, Tim, with urgency. Yeah. And that sends a message he sends a message to everybody to say, wow, he's serious. He has a plan. Right now, he's doing exactly what you said. He doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Right? And when you see a man like that, yeah, when you see, I spoke to a few of my mates. My mate was in the car park out in Stoke, going mad at the fact we've had 77% possession and lost the game. Those people are up there like Tim. I'm afraid they're not very happy, right? I was on my settee, and it's different, right? So he needs to sort this out. He needs to be better. He can't get everything right, obviously, right?
He has to be more decisive. To say that. He has to be more decisive.
He just needs to decide. Thank you, Elliot.
And he needs to decide everything he does. And I think what we are seeing is not an addled brain of an old man. I think what we are seeing is a man who maybe is not at his best anymore, is not at the leading edge of the game like he was, and also has too many responsibilities on his shoulder to possibly be able to handle them all in a decisive way. Football has gotten bigger since he's come to the club. The club has gotten bigger. He now has responsibilities that didn't exist when he was first there. He has issues he has to deal with players and agents and contracts, and he talks about, I have 300 staff I'm responsible for. Well, he does. I mean, there's probably 3 times the number of staff at Arsenal there was when he first arrived. It's not a game for managers to have total control, and certainly not managers in their, the sunset of their career, in my opinion, the dusk of their career, or however you want to say that if you were more eloquent and articulate than I am. Tim, one of the things that scares me is when the manager gets backed into a wall a little bit, and let's face it, we're a little bit lucky on opening day. We are a little unlucky in the second game, but now he's going into a big game away at Anfield. And my fear is that actually he will feel compelled to change it and tinker, and that the tinkering will lead to some worse decisions. Now, in theory, Koscielny comes back in, Alexis comes back in. First of all, do you think those two things will happen? And how worried are you that the solution he tries to find is worse than the problem he's trying to fix?
Yeah, I think those two will come back in. Yeah, I kind of share that concern because I still think he won't make the call between Bellerin and Chamberlain, and we'll have one on the right and one on the left. He might do something like put Francis Coquelin in or something like that.
I could absolutely see Xhaka being taken out because he gave the ball away for 2 goals in the first 2 games, and it being Ramsey and Coquelin. I could absolutely see that, which, by the way, disaster.
Yeah, because Liverpool murder you on that, and I really don't think that Coquelin's the player to solve that particular problem. But that's going to be a massive, massive worry for us because
if we're sloppy
Liverpool's
with the ball, point. And I know I'm now just interrupting you for no reason at all, but if we're sloppy on the ball the way we have been the first 2 games, you can't do that against Klopp's counterpress. Like that's disaster.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I don't really know what he'll do. Like I say, I don't think he'll make that call at wing back. I think he'll continue not to make that decision. And yeah, I think we will see Alexis come back into the team. I wouldn't be too surprised if he starts Giroud, for example, because he might make the decision that he wants to go over the top of the press, which is what he tried to do at Anfield last year with Giroud and Welbeck. And he tried to play them as a kind of front two, and it was
diabolical,
really
if I remember correctly.
yeah. But he probably won't do that again. He probably will start with Alexis, and yeah, it is quite worrying. I think he could really just solve quite a few issues by picking one of the right wing backs that he likes and playing, Kolasinac at left wing back, Monreal and Koscielny Monreal's like the left-sided centre-back, which, by the way, I think is a role he's absolutely perfect for over on that left-hand side. I think that's absolutely fine. And, probably Mustafi in the middle. And so hopefully, at the very least, the back three will have a bit more of a familiar look. I'm a little bit concerned about what he does in the wing-back positions and what he does in central midfield. As well, because he's made some quite odd, baffling decisions, so it's really difficult to read, and it'll be interesting to see if he's got a plan. To be fair, he has got 8 days to prepare for a trip to Anfield, which is a liberty we don't often get. We're usually coming off the back of we often actually play there in midweek.
And they play midweek. I mean, granted, they have a decent little lead, but I certainly don't think with the Champions League on the line, you screw around with the second leg of a qualifier.
No, big time. And obviously, they've got issues with Coutinho as well. I know they rested some players on Saturday against Palace, so it's obviously, in their minds, they're not absolutely unbeatable. But
I mean, they could have shipped 4 or 5 goals in that first leg, so they're going to have to be vigilant. I mean, let me just ask you. I mean, forget what you think he'll do. What 11 would you love to see him put out at Anfield on Sunday?
So I'd like to see Monreal left-sided centre half, Koscielny right side, Mustafi in the middle. I'd like to see Kolasinac and Bellerin as the wing backs. I would probably stick with Xhaka and Ramsey in midfield. I would still have reservations about that, but I still think it's the best we've got, which is a problem in itself. And then I would put Ozil and Alexis behind Lacazette. I think that is as close.
That's tasty. That's tasty. I mean, you're going to score goals.
that 11 might be on paper what probably our first choice 11 should be, really.
I have never seen a defence look more vulnerable once you get the ball in their final third than they looked in midweek in their Champions League qualifier. And I just think if that's the level of defending they do, then maybe you just try to beat them 4-3.
Maybe.
Clive, what about you? How would you like to see him line up? You got any differences from Tim's 11?
Not massively. I can see Welbeck playing. The reason why, and if Alexis isn't fit enough to start him on the bench, but it all depends on his fitness. But I can see Welbeck playing. I just think, I agree that we need to get out. I think Lacazette is really good at making space down the sides. He's a very smart player, very strong core. He's really got a real strong centre of gravity, so he can hold it up. With Liverpool, you must have the threat of speed. Otherwise, they push you into a small space and quick passes transition through you. Right, so if you must make the pitch bigger and you must make them travel long distances into your area. So our exit strategy's got to be brilliant, and we must play in their half. If we play in their half, they are rubbish. But if we play in our half, we're going to get killed. But you know what? They're not very good. They are. I think they got issues on fullbacks. Trent Alexander is actually a fantastic player, but he's only 13. We need to watch him. But I just think we need to be smart how we exit out of our half. If we get that right, once we're in their half, we are far superior to any team they've played. And Hoffenheim had about 6 or 7 chances, and we'll create just the same. But hopefully, we'll finish it this time.
Yeah, I mean that would be my hope as well. I think you have to try to score with them, because I don't think you can count on your defense. I mean, obviously for us, but especially given how vulnerable they look. and they're going to play their game. I mean, the one nice thing about Liverpool is they're not going to change their strategy to attack us. I mean, maybe they'll target a specific side or however you want to look at it, but we know what they're going to try to do. I mean, is there maybe an argument that they're just so bad at dealing with balls into the box and they're so bad on set pieces that hold your ears for a minute, that maybe it is right to start Giroud, Alexis, and Lacazette? I mean, I guess there's no way to do that, so it would be Giroud, Alexis, and Ozil, or Lacazette.
Well, is there an argument that Ozil doesn't play?
I mean, it's, his delivery is among best. This is the problem, right? So this leads me to my last point, and what I really wanted to touch on just quickly, Tim. We've talked about this. You're the one who made the analogy that we keep referencing on this pod because we are devoid of any original ideas. The building the plane in flight. The squad construction is as muddied as it has ever been, and that's saying something. We're selling center backs when we're not playing any because we don't have any. We're playing midfielders as wingbacks and wingbacks on the wrong wingback and wingbacks who are better as center backs. We're playing all kinds of players in positions that don't necessarily suit them in formations we're not necessarily used to. And you start talking about, well, we can't get Giroud in because then it's Ozil or Lacazette. And if we play Lacazette, well, do we have the height and the power? And the midfield is Xhaka Ramsey, which we're not even sure is workable for big games, but there is literally no other pairing you'd remotely trust. Central midfield looks like an obvious no-brainer need, and yet because we've failed to sell any of the players we've tried to sell, we probably can't go back into the market. The fact that we talked at the beginning of the summer about how many sales we had to make, and now they're all seemingly staying. Jenkinson went out on loan, so there's another player we can't get off our books. Joel Campbell's tweeting that he's back with the club. He's got a squad number. I mean, I forgot the guy existed. I mean, how bad is this squad construction in your mind right now, and can we remedy it at all with 10 days left of the window? Do you think we will do anything to meaningfully change the look of the squad?
I think players will go. I think Lucas Perez will go. I think we might find a home for Debussy and Gibbs. Interesting that neither of those players played in the under-23s tonight, which they have been, which I think has been fattening them up for sale really, but keeping them in the shop window. If we haven't done that, that suggests to me that maybe something's in the offing and we're actually protecting them from injury at this stage. Not least because Cohen Bramall plays left wing back usually for the under-23s and he's gone. So we played a lad tonight, De Silva, who's actually it's very common practice in our under-23s not to have a left back. We kind of use it as a developmental position anyway. But I think a lot of those players will end up going, whether it's permanently or on loan. The ones with 1 year left will probably be on loan. Will probably be permanent, even if they're free transfers. I don't know what I think is going to happen with Jack Wilshere. I watched a lot of the under-23 game tonight, and he looked quite good. He looked quite sharp, with the obvious caveat that it's the under-23s and it's much slower pace. But I don't know what his red card does to Arsene Wenger, whether that makes any kind of decision in his mind, whether that makes any difference. So,
does that red card carry a ban to the Premier League games?
I believe it does. Yeah,
I think it does. That'll be 3-game ban for violent conduct.
Yeah, I believe so.
Well, that's 3 games we don't have to worry about him playing. Now we just got to dodge the other 32.
Whether he's out the door, that might be the interesting one to keep an eye on. I do think all the others will go probably like on deadline day or something. I don't think at this stage anyone else is going to come in unless something drops like on the last kind of day or two. And like surprises come up at that point. I'm not saying that something this big will happen, but obviously nobody knew about Ozil until the day before. The Wilshere situation last summer didn't develop till deadline day, so kind of surprises can happen. But as far as I'm concerned, that's what it would be for us to bring someone in. It would be a surprise.
I got to tell you. Go ahead.
At this moment in time, I don't think that I don't think a transfer's in the offing at this moment in time. It will be like a Welbeck situation where he turns up at the training ground and says, "Sign me, please," or something like that.
I got to tell you, I mean, and look, Barcelona signed Paulinho, so and Vermaelen and Clive and all the ridiculous, shitty fucking players. But you look at it, and we're crying out for central midfielder. And it's the rare case where a talented one at Nice is on a reasonable release clause, and we didn't go for it. And Barcelona have only gone and signed him. So I'm talking about Jean-Michel Seri. So I mean, you just have to wonder what it takes for Arsene to want to pull the trigger on a guy, to see an area of need and go for it. I mean, I realize he just did that with Lacazette, but presumably it's been 4 seasons that he's been chasing a player in that position and 2 summers that he's looked at Lacazette, 1 summer where he decided not to do it. I just think it's baffling. And I mean, at this point now, if Chambers is really going, he now has to buy a center back, especially if he wants to stick with the system, or we're going to be talking about fullbacks as center backs all season long. Clive, final thoughts on that, on how our squad is constructed and if there's a chance to correct any of it before the window closes?
I think the one surprise may be a centre-back. I think the problem we have, really, we've got a number of players with very similar profile, which means they all can't play at the same time. I mean, for example, Chambers and Mustafi are very, very similar. You know, both played right back,
Terrible?
both spent time in midfield, both spend time in midfield. Both may not be quite dominant enough. They're not quick enough to play right back any longer. They're not technical enough to play centre midfield on a consistent basis. But that right channel, they're very good. They can both play in the centre, but not really dominant enough to be part one of the two consistently, in my opinion. Mustafi is probably a little bit more physical with his age, right? So one of those could go. It's quite interesting to see the Inter Milan story with Mustafi on loan. I mean, that's interesting. That doesn't just happen. That could be a word that's out there. And there's rumours that he's not settling so well. So who knows what can happen there? So if I'm thinking there could be a surprise, it could be at centre-back. I think that's one. And it'd be interesting to see if we targeted somebody. I've not heard a single whisper. But so yeah, that's how I see it. Centre-mid, we got the 3-star hotels, didn't we, Tim? We got a bunch of those. I think he'll just polish up the foyer, try and get him to receive it on the back foot and spin it out the other side and keep the distances close, see if we can get through. Right? So we'll play 1-1 game. As soon as he messes up, we'll drop him to the bench and then we'll put someone else in, and we'll all argue amongst ourselves until they make a mistake. But really, we've got a bunch of centre midfield players that all got good attributes, but we're not quite convinced about them as a fan group. Right, and that's the truth of it. That's why we argue about it so much. So
we argue?
So yeah.
You must be hanging out with the wrong people. Everyone just nods and agrees with me, and we all get along great and hold hands and sing Kumbaya, and it's fantastic.
We discuss, shall we say. Exactly. We discuss.
Yeah, so we shall see. I mean, the Liverpool game could potentially trigger the kind of hectic close to the window that the 8-2 at Old Trafford did yesteryear. I think the thing that worries me, you guys, the thing that is on my mind is, on the one hand, we are making the kind of moves that say we are going to win now. We're all in to win now. We're keeping Alexis, risking losing him on a free. Keeping Ozil, risking losing him on a free. Keeping Ox, risking losing him on a free. Again, right there, what would you say, 150 million pounds of transfer fees at least, that we're pissing away. We're willing to just let it walk. We've got guys going to final years of contracts. We're keeping Olivier Giroud, who, love him or hate him, you probably could have gotten 30 million from a Premier League team for him today. He's over 30 and closing in on the final years of his deal. We are making the decision to forego future opportunity for present success, and yet not pushing the boat out far enough to ensure present success. Not bringing in the central midfielder we so clearly need. Not bringing in the extra center back that we so clearly need, especially in light of recent transactions. And that is the thing I don't get. Arsene, if you want to go for it right now and be short-termist, you've earned the right. You had to think long-term after the stadium move. Sure. Blow the whole stack of cash. Bring in all the players. Be ruthless. Get rid of guys you don't think are good enough and go for it. Even if I disagree with what you said, I'll agree with what you're trying. But to half-ass it, to risk losing these key guys for free in a season where we clearly do not have the squad to potentially even claw back into the top 4, let alone challenge for the league, is insanity. It will lead to a season next season that could be epically horrendous, which would be great for content. So thanks, Arsene. We appreciate that. And then he fucks off, and it's a new manager looking at a squad that finished, 7th, 8th, doesn't have the cash from sales that it could have had, and is now trying to rebuild. I just think it is a perplexing situation that we are in. And on that note, up the Arsenal. Let's go win at Anfield. So Paul's already gone. He's on Twitter at @PositiveMyPants. He would be happy to take any criticism for this podcast that you'd like to meet out. Tim is on Twitter at Stoberto. Tim, as always, thank you.
My pleasure. And
Tim's got a column coming out on our wingback issue du jour, so look for that coming out. Is that always Thursday, Tim? Is that when that'll be out?
Yes.
Alrighty then. And Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Thank you, Clive.
Thank you, young man.
Well, if you say so. Clive does not have a column coming out Thursday. Is that correct?
I don't, but I'll be retweeting Tim's and criticizing it. Well, no, commenting on it as we always
commenting, discussing. That's right. My name's Elliot Smith. You should be blocking me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. I am happy to not take any of the abuse for the opinions that were put forth today. In any event, please give us 5-star review and write nasty stuff about us in the comments section. We will be back. Potentially, we're debating internally whether to do a match preview or not. To be fair, Tim is doing video previews this season, and they are far superior to anything that we would do on this podcast. So it may be a case where we just punt and let Tim handle that in his way, and then just do these post-match podcasts, because as I have been told, the team apparently finds this tedious enough as it is. In any event, we'll be back. We enjoy it. Thank you for listening, and talk to you after Anfield. Cheers.